it's just constant ramping up of tension and momentum, it seems like.
Welcome to the Crooked Table Podcast, where we discuss the world of film from a fresh angle. And now your host, Robert Yanis Jr.
Welcome to the Crooked Table Podcast. This is Rob. On this show, we democratize the film criticism conversation by bringing on fans and critics alike to dig into their personal connection to a current or classic release. And you can tell that it's been a long day because I feel like I said democratize weird right there. You'd think after X number of episodes with that tagline, I would have that pretty much down. But anyway, this episode, we're going to be talking about the 1986 film Aliens, and I'm honored to welcome to the show Will Nexii. Welcome to the show, Will.
Hey, how's it going? How are you doing today?
Pretty good. Coronavirus free as far as I know. So that's good. That's
definitely good.
Not that there's any tests to get around to figure any of that out, but that's a totally different topic.
Yeah.
So you and I first connected on CF3 podcast. So over there we talked about Demolition Man and Commando, and I think we were working on another episode with them at some point in the near future. I don't want to give away what movie this heavily being focused on because that's outside of the purview of this show. I'll let the CF3 guys promote that on their own. But so what is kind of generally, we talked about sort of 80s, 90s action movies over there. But what is kind of your general interest in movies? Like what kind of movies are you normally drawn to? I mean, obviously sci-fi by this one, but just give listeners a little bit of a peek behind the curtain.
Yeah, so it's mostly sci-fi. I like horror too. I definitely love horror. I like some action, but action's kind of hit or miss usually. Like I like action sci-fi or like action comedy, like the Marvel films kind of are pretty good. But yeah, mostly sci-fi is like the theme that always keeps coming back to me. And like if I see a new movie out and it's sci-fi, there's probably a decent chance that I'll check it out at some point.
What are some of like your favorite ones just lately that you've seen, like in the last couple of years, I guess, like recent?
Oh gosh, lately, well, it's not really sci-fi, it's more comedy, but I've been watching a lot of Letterkenny, which is a TV show on Hulu from Canada.
Nice.
And I've been watching Tiger King.
Everybody's been watching Tiger King. I feel like the only person who isn't watching Tiger King, and I live in Tampa, where that whole big cat rescue thing and everything is happening.
Wow.
Maybe that's part of why I'm like, I don't need to. I live that life. I mean, not that life, but I'm familiar with it enough that I don't really need to watch it.
Yeah, I mean, I kind of bounce back and forth between like older movies and newer movies. Like, there's a kind of interesting kind of Lovecraftian horror movie called Cold Skin a couple of years ago.
Interesting.
And like, I mean, my friend Jeff came on your podcast and talked about Dark City. That's an all-time favorite of mine.
Yeah, that's a really interesting movie that I think, and this is part of why I like doing the show, is that I think a lot of people either forgot about that or just never caught up with it. And so that was a good opportunity for me, who I saw that, I think when it came on DVD or something at some point. But I hadn't seen it since then. So it had been like 20 years since I saw it. And I still have to watch the director's cut of it. Since my conversation with Jeff, I haven't gone back and done that, but would you recommend that version, or have you seen both?
Yeah, I've seen both. I'm not entirely clear on what the differences are.
Yeah.
But I think the final fight scene's extended in the director's cut.
Yeah, that might be right.
I mean, I saw it initially in the theaters and was blown away, and that came before The Matrix, actually, which I thought was interesting.
Right, exactly. Like the year before, and I think they shared, Jeff and I mentioned on that episode, I think they shared like some of the production stuff behind the scenes, like props or sets and that kind of thing, which is funny to think about.
I saw that movie Mortal Engines, which was done by Peter Jackson, which was kind of like the steampunk Mobile City kind of movie, which was kind of decent.
Yeah, I remember that.
It was entertaining.
I don't think it did super well. I think it wasn't supposed to kick off a franchise or something.
Yeah, I think it was.
So much for that.
Whoops.
But I mean, we'll definitely talk about director's cuts and such going, in this episode, because I'm assuming you're familiar with the Aliens extended
yes.
version. Yeah, so
Oh,
we'll
yeah,
talk
that's the
about
only
that.
version I'll watch these days.
Yeah, yeah, I agree. I think that it brings a lot to the movies specifically. So I think it's a good kind of cue lead up into the Aliens discussion. Just talk about what is your general, what are your thoughts on this franchise? Like, is this a big franchise for you, or is this one movie just kind of an outlier?
It's always been a big franchise for me just because I love the xenomorphs and I love the horror sci-fi aspect, which are two of my favorite like themes in movies and genres. And the xenomorph is kind of like the perfect nightmare creature in a way.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it's kind of been treated better in some movies than others, I guess you could say. And I'm not a huge fan of the direction that this franchise has gone in necessarily. Like, I enjoyed Covenant, but it wasn't, I like Covenant as an Aliens movie. I didn't really like it as a movie, if that makes any sense. Like, I didn't like the story with David creating the xenomorphs out of the creatures that they found on that planet, and I don't know. I think Ridley Scott's lost the theme and is going off in his own direction and wants to do away with the xenomorph entirely, I heard.
Yeah, it's weird in a franchise like Alien or even Terminator, which again we have a James Cameron connection there.
Yeah,
but where they start off, they start off with a certain filmmaker, and then they veer away from that, and then when that filmmaker comes back and tries to take the reins, it doesn't really ever completely come together. I think in the case of Dark Fate on the Terminator side, it had been like two failed, misfired attempts at trying to get the Terminator franchise back on track, and Dark Fate was more of a too little, too late situation. And then with Alien, we had these 4 really different films. I mean, I don't really like talking about Alien Resurrection personally, but
or
like
3.
Ridley,
I'm not a big fan of 3.
3 is okay. I don't like it. I don't think it's a great movie, but it ends Ripley's arc in a more satisfying way than Resurrection does.
Yeah.
So I'm happy with the way it ends. Plus, it's got that novelty of being David Fincher's first film. So you have Fincher, Cameron, and Scott. So there's 3 really strong filmmakers. So the film franchise had this whole I don't want to say journeyman quality to it, but where every film it was just a different filmmaker doing their own version of what an Alien movie was. And we'll talk about. Yeah, go ahead.
Well, and Cameron wasn't that well known when he did Aliens either.
Yeah,
from what I understand.
No, exactly. I think he before that he had the Terminator, the first one, and then I think that was like his second or third movie, Terminator. So he was still really early on in his career, but even then, Alien is the whole sci-fi horror thing that you mentioned, and then Alien 3 is kind of like a prison movie for some reason.
Yeah.
And then Aliens, as we'll get into, is like the war movie version of it. So it's like, you get 3 different genres in a way out of this one concept. And I think that's always been what has made the franchise interesting. And then you get to Prometheus and it's just like Ridley Scott, we're going to do something else for, I'm like, I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't know how I feel about that.
Yeah, I don't know how I feel about the new direction either. It's not what I would have done.
Absolutely. So I feel like we're kind of already leading into our Aliens conversation. So why don't we go ahead and listen to a little bit of the trailer for Aliens right now.
Just tell me one thing, Burke. You're going out there to destroy them, right? Not to study, not to bring back, but to wipe them out.
That's the plan.
All right, people, on the ready line. Are you me? Yeah! Are you me? Yeah! Get on the ready line, Marine! Get some to die! Get on the ready line!
That was a little bit of the trailer for Aliens from 1986, written and directed by James Cameron. I always forgot that this is one of the few that he actually wrote. He stopped writing his own movies, I think, at a certain point, and was co-writing them and things like that. I always forget that he actually wrote this one too. So I think Alien and Aliens is one of those classic cinematic conversations for as far as which one do you prefer? I know in this case the answer for you is Aliens, but why do you prefer Aliens over Alien if in fact you do? And what was your first exposure to this particular chapter?
Well, so Alien I was never allowed to see as a child because my parents saw it when it came out in the theater and it scared my mom to death. And she was like, "You're not allowed to see that," because I used to get nightmares as a kid and I had a very big imagination as a child, you could say. And so one day at the middle school library, I found a novelization of the movie of Aliens. And so since I couldn't watch it and I was really curious about it because I've been told I wasn't allowed to watch it, I read the novel and it scared me to death. Like, I had real bad nightmares for a couple weeks, but then, like, I kind of overcame them, actually, and that was the last time I was really terrified as a child.
Wow, so Aliens was a formative part of your, I guess, childhood development.
Yeah, like, I mean, you always have random nightmares here and there, but that was the last time that I really remember being scared by something, because I was just scared so intensely by the concept of these creatures that burst out of your chest and are like beetles and insects and apes and just nightmare fuel dragons, basically.
Yeah.
They're
Space
dragons come to life. Yeah, they're space dragons, exactly. And it's kind of funny you actually say space dragons because I actually collect little dragon miniatures and stuff.
Nice. No way.
I wonder if that has some connection with it.
Yeah, there you go.
Yeah.
So when did you actually get a chance to see Aliens, the movie itself?
So the first time I got a chance to see it was in high school. I rented it from Blockbuster, and I watched it with my friend, and that was the original theatrical cut. Because at that time, the special edition was only available on Laserdisc. And I didn't know anybody who had the Laserdisc edition, Laserdisc or the Laserdisc player or anything like that.
Right. I don't think anybody knows anybody that ever had Laserdisc. I feel like it's one of those things that was out there, and I remember seeing it in stores, but nobody that I've ever really encountered has ever been like, "Oh man, you need to check out my Laserdisc collection."
Yeah, they were real weird, and they were these huge, like, record-sized DVDs, proto DVDs, basically. They were super bizarre, super expensive, I think.
The beginning of special features accompanying your films, though, I believe, was Laserdisc, which is cool.
Oh, yeah, definitely. Because they had the extra space on the disc, and they were like, let's fill it up.
Yeah, exactly. So did you see Alien and Aliens around the same time? Like, did you watch them in order, or did you see Aliens and then go back?
I saw Aliens first, and then I saw Alien a couple weekends later when we went back to Blockbuster.
Okay.
And I was like, I want to see more of this. Like,
so over the years, then, how has your perception towards the two films changed, and how do you what is it about Aliens that is it just because it's more action heavy than the first one? Like, what about the second film really vibes with you, do you think?
I think definitely the action appeals to me because growing up, my dad would always take me to action movies and stuff, so we would see a lot of those together. So action films from like the 80s and 90s kind of have a special place in my heart from that.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
And, like, just action films that have always, I mean, nowadays not so much with action films because they're just kind of whatever, I guess. I don't know. They've kind of lost their interest for me. You can only see the same thing so many times in different ways.
Mm-hmm.
But, like, it's the mix of sci-fi and action, I think, that really nails it perfectly. And it's like, Cameron said it was supposed to be kind of like a Vietnam War analogy in a way, was how he pictured it. Like, the soldiers with their technological superiority being defeated by monsters who come out of the night and don't follow any rules and whatever and outnumber them and everything.
Yeah, I think you definitely get that with the whole. You get that vibe with the whole military unit and all the all the characters, and then just kind of that. It does have that sort of Apocalypse Now-esque vibe. That's kind of what I was alluding to with the whole that it's a sci-fi horror, with like a war movie aspect thrown in there. And so was that weird for you going back and watching the second one and then going to see the first one? Because it's like, in a way, kind of a completely different genre. Were you kind of disappointed by the lack of action in the first one, or how do you feel about that one now?
Yeah, initially I was disappointed by the lack of action because as a teenager I was really about like action films and stuff like that and heavy stimulation and so it was a much slower burn, but over time I've come to appreciate it a lot more, and like I really do like Alien now on its own.
I think it's one of those things that whichever one you encounter first is kind of the one that you always gravitate towards a little bit. But it's sort of like Star Wars fans with like Star Wars and The Empire Strikes Back. It's like they're both kind of held almost in equal esteem to fans. It just kind of, it's depends on where you were when you saw whatever film and that kind of thing. So we'll get into the Alien 3 and how that paid off or didn't pay off. Aliens a little bit later, but yeah, I thought it was interesting that you picked Aliens and not Alien, just because they do have that. They're like two heads of the same coin in a way, two xenomorph heads of the same coin, or one head inside the other head maybe that pops out.
Yeah, a little jaws popping out.
A little bit, but it's also too. It's interesting as far as its place as a big Hollywood sequel, because I think people might not really think about it or remember it now at this point. Now everything gets a sequel. Now everything's a shared universe. But back in the day, like sequels were not a given. Sequels just didn't happen. And sequels were almost always considered inferior to the original. I mean,
on
this podcast, I've talked about, Terminator 2, Empire Strikes Back. We did a whole Star Wars thing. But like before the mid to late 80s, like before Empire and this movie and things like that started changing that perception, a sequel was always like a diluted version of it. Like you think of, I don't know, Airplane and how much people love Airplane. And then there's an Airplane 2 that no one talks about because why would you bother? But I think with this one, it's also not only that sequels can be artistically and stylistically and creatively up to the level of the original, if not surpassing it, but it's also just with the title alone, it's just like it's the same but more. Instead of one alien, there's a bunch of aliens, and I love that the title is so simple. Yeah, exactly. Like I love the way that he manages to get that across with the simple addition of an S at the end of the title.
Oh, it's so much more potent than Alien 2 would have been.
Right. Yeah, if you liked Alien, here's multiples. We're gonna multiply the aliens. So, let's talk about a little bit about the director's cut itself. So, the director's cut obviously is 17 minutes longer, and I think contributes a ton to not only I don't know if there's a lot of action necessarily that was cut out. I feel like it was all character stuff, but I think it does balance out the movie in a really powerful way, especially for Ripley. Can you speak to that a little bit?
No, definitely. It gives it a lot more weight to the story. Like you see the colony as it is before the aliens come. You see the Weyland-Yutani logo everywhere, bright and bold. The corporation finally gets a name from Alien. I mean, you see the extended scene on the drop ship while they're flying down to the planet with Hudson bragging about the weapon systems that they have, making them seem even more invincible and like ready to deal with anything, when in reality they're completely unprepared. I mean, there's just a ton of extra scenes in the director's cut that really add to the whole weight of the story and give it a lot more life, I think, than a straight up sci-fi action film might have necessarily. And
I think Ripley's character is far more developed. I think it's the director's cut, I think, where you learn that she had a daughter, right?
Yeah, and they actually show, so the picture that they show of Ripley's daughter as a grown woman is actually a picture of Ripley's mom in real life.
Oh wow, that's cool.
Yeah, but yeah, I mean, and part of the boardroom scene is cut out in the theatrical cut, so you don't see the full grilling and the corporate bigwigs bullshitting Ripley about her, disbelieving her experience. And I mean, there's a lot that got left on the cutting room floor. I mean, it's 17 minutes doesn't sound like it's that much. I mean, obviously it was a lot because they felt like the movie wouldn't succeed theatrically with all that extra footage in there. So they cut it out for some reason or another. And like the one scene that I do agree with them cutting from the theatrical cut was when they're talking about the alien queen, because they kind of give it away almost. When they're talking about, oh, it's like an ant hive. Oh, bees have hives. Like,
yeah. So
between Hudson and Vasquez, and
so you think it actually that setup would have kind of spoiled the big reveal at the end?
Yeah, and that's why they cut that scene out from what I read, was specifically because they felt it gave away too much of the queen's appearance, like the pure shock of, look, it's an alien but bigger. It's the mother alien. Like, it's the one laying all the eggs.
There's not just more of them. There's a really huge one, too.
Yeah, and she's pissed.
Yeah, I think it's probably just for runtime, a lot of it, that it was trimmed down, because I think the theatrical cut is 137 minutes, and I think this was also before every movie that came out was like 2.5 hours. I think.
Oh yeah, it was unheard
Hobbs
of
and
in
Shaw is like 140 minutes. I feel like,
Oh,
like everything is so long now.
Yeah,
so,
everything's gotten real long these days because they've seen that a longer movie can give a storyteller more freedom to tell a more, in theory, a better story. You would hope a better story with that extra time, and that audiences are willing to sit there and still pay for it. But in 86, a 2.5 hour long movie was unheard of.
Yeah, exactly. Especially maybe if it was like I don't know, Amadeus or something, like an Oscar, like a biopic, like an Oscar play, but a mainstream, blockbuster, like crowd pleasing sequel like this, yeah, that wouldn't have happened. But then now, fast forward 20-something years, 30-something years actually, and you get, 3 hours of the Avengers traveling through time and all that stuff. So it's like completely different landscape. I also, I think I saw these movies, I want to say late teens, early 20s. It might have been Alien versus Predator coming out, where I saw that and I was like, you know what? I should catch up on those. I don't think because these were not movies that were really floating around my household as a kid for obvious reasons.
Right.
So I think I got the Alien quadrilogy, like each one out of the library or something on DVD. So I don't even know if I've ever seen the theatrical cut of Aliens, and it's hard for me to imagine the movie working as well with all that stuff taken out. Like,
it doesn't.
Yeah, even as is, this was one of the biggest hits of 1986, and it got like 7 Oscar nominations, including one for Sigourney Weaver, which is insane considering the kind of movie it is. So
a woman in an action film getting an Academy Award, that was like unheard of.
Yeah, exactly. So I feel like all of that would have been heightened even further had this movie been released with all that additional footage and all that, even this, and I keep focusing on this because it is so crucial to Ripley's story in this movie, but even the reveal that she had a daughter, that she had that, like, that, the maternal instinct that she has for Newt isn't just because she's a woman. The
whole Newt arc doesn't really make sense without the weight of Ripley having found out that she lost her daughter by 2 years. Like 2 years, if she'd been found 2 years sooner, she would have been home for her daughter eventually, like way later than her 11th birthday, but she still would have gotten to see her again. But now she's gone. Yeah,
she would have gotten her like interstellar reunion scene at the very end of that movie. But yeah, exactly. And I think it plays up to, that's a classic trope in sci-fi movies, is like the evil corporation. And I think the director's cut of this one really leans into that a lot more. And this film, compared to the first one, leans into that a lot more. As we've seen in the Terminator films, that's definitely something that James Cameron loves, is his evil corporation. Yeah. So it's, and there it's Cyberdyne, and here it's Weyland-Yutani. So I guess we should get into a little bit of that, and like how this movie builds up the mythos of the company, as it were.
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of cyberpunk in a way, like the megacorp.
Exactly,
like,
it really is.
The colossal corporation that's so big it has the corner on building spacecraft, like an English-Japanese conglomerate, like that builds spacecrafts. Like, how big a corporation must that be?
Mm-hmm.
But it's kind of funny because in the movie they're talking about money, and Burke is like, Ripley, we can make millions. And like nowadays that'd be billions, obviously.
Right.
And they're talking about like the cost of the whole thermonuclear atmospheric processors in the millions of dollars, like not even hundreds of millions, but just millions.
Right. Yeah, exactly.
I mean, it's definitely dated in some ways by that, but
at the
like,
same time, the whole, profit over human life thing is sort of timeless, unfortunately. In a real way.
I mean, Wayland Yutani plays a huge role in the whole alien mythos, like in all the rest of the movies and in like the comic books and in the novelizations and the novels that they wrote too off of the alien mythos that was created between Giger and Scott and Cameron and Fincher. Like, there's quite a lot of creative potential in that story universe, and that's another thing that always brings me back to this whole franchise, is not just the movies but the comic books and the novels too.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
like the comic books are something that I was able to get access to as a teenager when I wasn't really supposed, and as a younger child when I really wasn't supposed to be knowing about this franchise, Like I would find the comics at the comic book store and pick them up and be like fascinated because I'd already read the novel of Aliens, so I was just hooked after that.
I was a big novelization reader too as a kid. I think that's cool that was your entry point into this franchise, though you're reading about it first. That's such a neat way to come in.
I think it gave the Alien a lot more horror, actually, by reading it in a novelization form, because I didn't really have a form in my mind necessarily, so it was more tenuous and nightmarish in a way.
Right, and the images in your head didn't need to be run by the MPAA. So
no, like the aliens in my head were way worse than in the movie, actually.
That's funny. So going back to the company, and I love the fact that they not only do they have that evil corporation sort of hanging over this whole film and this whole franchise, as you mentioned, but you have Paul Reiser, who is kind of very nebbishy, like stand-up comic stuff kind of thing at that point, and him representing that, like the most unassuming person, the most unintimidating person, kind of representing the air quotes friendly face of this evil corporation.
Oh yeah,
just a genius bit of casting.
No, it was perfect. Like you can't really picture it without the scene where Ripley loses her daughter. You can't picture Aliens without Paul Reiser as Carter Burke. Like, he's the perfect little weasel. And then, I mean, the eventual betrayal when he's backed into a corner and he's going to get found out for causing all these problems, and his power grab to make money off of the alien as a bioweapon. Like, I mean, he perfectly epitomizes Wayland Yutani as they come to be recognized in the mythos and the whole franchise. Like the evil corporation that's willing to do anything to turn a profit, to turn the alien into a bioweapon, regardless of the consequences. Like in one of the comics, the Wayland Yutani does get an alien back to Earth eventually, and it gets loose and decimates the planet. Like, and they have to fight a whole war to eventually reclaim the planet from the aliens and stuff. It's crazy.
Wow. See, that's we'll definitely talk about paths they should have or could still take as far as following up Aliens, because obviously there's been a lot of talk about that over the last few years. But that sounds like a story that they could definitely bring to the screen.
It would be amazing.
Yeah.
That comic, what was it called, like the Earth War series or something like that? It was 3 comics or 3 graphic novels together.
Very cool. I feel like Ridley Scott is the only one that's really obsessed with. But how did they start? Or just as you mentioned earlier, just how do I get off of these xenomorphs and just do something completely different under the alien name, under the alien brand, I guess, basically.
Yeah, that's exactly what he wants to do. He wants to get away from the xenomorph. He feels like its time is done. When I don't agree with that.
Well, its time it's hard to say when its time is done, because
so mismanaged.
Yes, exactly. Like, I keep going back to this, but obviously we have James Cameron as sort of the linking piece here. But just like the Terminator franchise, the Alien franchise has one really strong film, a second really strong, arguably better film, and then a bunch of crap that is like all over the place. It's like, are there good things in some of those movies? Maybe, but it's like none of them. It's all like it's such a precipitous drop from 1 and 2, and then everything else that is just...
Oh, yeah. I mean,
can't
it perfectly
blame-
lives up to the downfall of the sequel that we were talking about earlier. Like, the sequel is a diluted, watered-down version of the original. And
Right.
I think you have two very strong, very original films, and the third one has some merit here and there. But after that, it's just rubbish.
Right. Yeah,
Like-
no. I actually...
Like you said, there's redeeming parts here and there, but none of them are anywhere near the originals.
Yeah, 100%. And that's ironically or coincidentally, that's actually the thing that I appreciate about both Alien 3 and Terminator 3 Rise of the Machines is the ending. Like, I think everything that comes before the last 5 minutes is kind of all over the place and doesn't really work, or it works as like a much inferior version of everything that came before it. But the fact that Terminator 3 ends with John Connor like set up to be the savior of humanity. The fact that Alien 3 ends with Ripley literally giving her life to destroy the xenomorph to keep the company from getting it, which that's been all she's been doing this whole time.
No, yeah. She's been at war with the company this whole time.
And I think those are perfect ways of ending those character stories, which is why when I did get the Alien movies, I picked up the triple pack DVD years ago from Target or wherever, where it doesn't have Alien Resurrection. I'm like, I don't need that. I'm going to pretend that's the end. I'm also obsessed with the concept of a trilogy, so that's in general doesn't.
Gotcha.
Yeah, that it's a lot easier for me to cut out the fourth one. Generally, but
yeah, you don't really need to pay attention to Resurrection. It's just kind of
it's kind of a mess. I think that I wanted to talk about one with the company. We talked about how Aliens carries over that whole theme about Weyland-Yutani and them trying to get the xenomorph no matter what. The crew is expendable, that kind of thing. And
everything's expendable.
Pretty much. And everything, Cameron really honors that theme in this one, obviously. But in a lot of ways, he also subverts audience expectations, which is something else he does. And, in Terminator 2, it's the T-800 turns out to be the hero, obviously.
Right.
As opposed to the other way. And here you have sort of a prototype of that twist with the whole Bishop versus Ash thing.
Yeah. And Lance Henriksen was amazing in that role as Bishop. Like,
he was.
Again, you can't have Aliens without him as Bishop. Like, you just can't. Like, I can't think of an actor who could be recast and have it be anywhere near as good of a movie, and he's just perfect for the role. Like, they really nailed the casting in a lot of ways on this movie, I think.
Yeah, I think so too. But yeah, it's just, I think it's a testament to just Cameron's sort of mastery over the sequel as an art form too. You get him kind of cutting his teeth sequel wise. Well, I mean, he did do Piranha 2 or whatever that was, like his first movie. I don't count. Yeah. I haven't seen that, so I don't know how much it even ties into Piranha 1. But
I have no idea.
But he does Aliens, and then I think The Abyss, and then Terminator 2. So it's sort of like him kind of developing, like, okay, how would I approach a sequel? Like, how do I do the same, bigger, plural this time, but also flip things on its head enough to make everything feel fresh. And I think you get a lot of that here. And Bishop's obviously a key part of that. So I think that's kind of a good segue into the rest of the supporting cast. I mean, in this thing, we talked about Sigourney Weaver.
One thing I wanted to say real quick,
go ahead.
Is that, like, so I think what Cameron nailed with Aliens and what the follow-up sequels to Aliens, Alien 3 Resurrection, and the rest of them kind of lost track of, is, like you said, Cameron did something fresh and new with the same basic material of the xenomorph. And the subsequent movies have been all trying to do the same thing as what's come in previous movies, which is just be like a horror sci-fi. Or telling a different story without the xenomorphs, which is whatever. But I think they've really lost sight of what Cameron did to make Aliens just as good or better in some ways than Alien was originally.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, I agree. I mean, I think he blew out the premise and expanded upon it in ways that naturally shifted the genre, where it didn't have to, he took the template of what was there, and he's like, well, what's the logical next step to this without, retreading too many of the same story points.
And I think 3's big downfall was it tried to go back to the roots of Alien and tried to just be like a sci-fi horror, but in a prison, which was whatever, instead of on a spaceship.
Yeah, that's a good point. It's basically more the same, but more, just more people in the place instead.
Yeah.
And it's like, yeah, it doesn't exactly work. And that movie just, it feels like it's just really flat to me for a lot of the runtime. It's just like, this is just, I don't really care about this or any of the characters.
No, not like you do about the Marines. Like, you care about the Marines, like...
Exactly.
When Hudson gets dragged under the ground, like, you care about that. Like, you care about Apone getting grabbed from behind and dragged off. And you care when they find out that he's still alive in the nest and being impregnated.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, there's something about this particular... Like, the original film has obviously a lot of standout supporting characters as well, but I feel like something about this cast and this ensemble, you know, not only Weaver, but also Michael Biehn, Paul Reiser, Lance Henriksen, even Carrie Henn. Obviously, we mentioned Bill Paxton's Hudson. Everybody in this movie, Jeanette Goldstein, like it's just, they gel together as such an ensemble.
Oh, yeah.
In a way that none of the other, like, I can't think of any of the other, beyond the second film, any of the other supporting characters in really any of the other. I think Charles Dance is in Alien 3, but that's not really, I forget his character's name because he's not really interesting whatsoever. Yeah. The only things I can really think of in the third one is that Lance Henriksen shows up at the end and as Bishop. But that's again only because I'm like, hey, Lance Henriksen, what are you doing here?
Yeah.
Getting a paycheck, I guess. But yeah, so it just, let's talk about the cast, the supporting cast here. Obviously, Michael Biehn and Bill Paxton coming over from the Terminator to join this one. But what is it about this ensemble that you think is still really makes fans, every time any kind of whisper happens online of, oh, they want to do an Alien movie, like that picks up from Aliens, like legit with Hicks and with all because that's something that I know Neil Blomkamp, the guy that did District 9 and worked with her on Chappie, Sigourney Weaver. He wants to do that. I don't know if that's even happening anymore. I feel like that kind of
it got killed in favor of Prometheus, from what I understood.
Let's talk about what is it about this cast do you think that works so well?
So one thing that I know is that they train like the whole Marine squad together as a whole with the SAS for a couple weeks before shooting, and like the guy who plays Apone was an actual real Marine from the Vietnam War. In fact, I think he was the first African American to be promoted to sergeant or something like that. Nice. So like he had real Marine credentials, so like he whipped them into shape as a real unit, and I think that really comes through in the movie, and that they really care about each other and that they're a squad and that they're best buddies and like they're ribbing each other on the ship and like, hey Vasquez, you ever been mistaken for a woman? No, have you? And like all the back and forth bantering and like the camaraderie is really what seals it, I think, and really makes them cohesive. And Ripley and Gorman and Paul Reiser were not allowed to train with the Marines because they were supposed to be set apart and like isolated from the Marines and like not part of the squad.
Right.
And I think that comes through in the shooting too. Like it's little things like body language and the way people angle their bodies to each other when they're talking. And like all sorts of little tiny things that add to the gestalt, like cohesiveness of the squad is like the ultimate badasses. They're really like set up before everything goes to rubbish. Like they're really set up to be like the ultimate badasses. Like we're here on the planet, we're gonna secure things, like we're gonna check everything out with our motion trackers. Like we've got all this technology and like
Yeah, it's like if Harvey Keitel's Pulp Fiction character was a squad of Marines, this is who you'd call in to come and solve your problems. They're the wolf, basically. Yeah, and I think that, as you said, the camaraderie comes across. Cameron's really smart about weaving in, and sprinkling in some levity amongst all of it. So then the movie never really feels too self-serious either. You have that kind of joking, kind of underlying thing with some of their interactions until shit gets real. And even then, it's kind of funny with the game over, man. Game over. Like so quotable. Everything in this movie is so quotable.
It keeps it funny. Like, this movie is so quotable. It's ridiculous.
Yeah, it never makes itself it never, I don't know, it never takes its, it like the movie has stakes, obviously, but it never forgets what kind of movie it is. It knows it's a big, like, popcorn flick, and it leads into
not
that.
as heavy-hearted as Alien was and somber.
Right, exactly.
Like, I find it more enjoyable.
Yeah, it's more fun to watch than Alien, for sure.
Yeah.
Because Alien's whole thing is it's basically a slasher movie in space, or a haunted house movie on a spaceship, or whatever you want to call it. But yeah, it's that kind of sense of foreboding that hangs over it, an atmosphere. It's like, the Alien has more in common with something like Shining, like The Shining, or something like
definitely.
that, than Aliens, which is more like a Terminator movie in a way, I guess.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah. So going back to that whole, how much we love the ensemble, who sadly falls apart by the end of the movie. They did leave us Hicks and Newt, and kind of part of Bishop's head, or his torso. I think it's his torso.
It's his torso.
So how bummed out were you when you went to see Alien 3? You're like, ooh, more Hicks. I can't wait to see what happens next.
I found out about it before I ever saw Alien
Thank goodness.
3, so it took me a long time before I was ever willing to see it, just because I was not willing to say goodbye to Hicks and Newt and I just wasn't ready for it.
I mean, that's kind of the worst part.
I love this movie, and I just wasn't. I didn't want to deal with them dying. Like, I thought it was bullshit. Like,
that's kind of the worst part of it too, is that you don't even get to say goodbye to them. She wakes up and she's like, "Oh crap, I'm the only one here."
Yeah,
kind of. It's again to go. I keep doing this, but I mean, it's like Dark Fate, where they're like, "You remember John Connor? Don't worry about John Connor anymore. We got other things to." I don't. Spoilers if you haven't seen Dark Fate.
I don't intend to.
Okay, well then, do you know how it starts?
No.
Okay, well it starts early on. It's kind of soon after Terminator 2, and John and Sarah Connor are kind of confronted again by a T-800, and it takes out John Connor, like literally in the first 2 minutes of the movie. So it's kind of like this with the Alien 3, where they're like, "Oh, look at all these characters you love. We're gonna kill most of them." So what? I guess what I want to get to here is, where would you want to see? Would you want to see Blomkamp or anyone else try and do a like literal follow up to this, or do you like just leave it alone, just make it a 2-film series, and we'll end it there?
So there's an audio drama that Audible put out, actually, based on William Gibson's original script for Alien 3, which was kind of a Cold War thing. Like, Hicks and Bishop and Ripley and Newt go to, like, this lock has like a problem in space travel, and they get stranded at like some space station out in the middle of space. And then there's like some Cold War thing between like Americans, between like the ICC, the Weyland-Yutani, the corporations, versus like some kind of vaguely Russian Chinese threat that's communist on like another space station. And like it's a really good audio drama. Like, I would definitely recommend it if you want more of Aliens, because it picks up right where it's basically like Alien 3 never happened.
Mm-hmm.
It's the script that I wish that they'd done, because William Gibson was an old favorite author of mine. I haven't read any of his recent stuff, but like his Cyberpunk Sprawl trilogy is one of my favorite trilogies of fiction of all time. And like, he wrote the script for Alien 3, and like, I so wish that this had happened instead.
Yeah.
But yeah, I'd be totally down for like them to do like the Alien Earth War trilogy, because that's kind of similar to Aliens, picking up after Aliens, with like a Marine and like a colonial survivor as like the only people to escape from an alien infestation. And then like everything goes to shit back on Earth when the aliens get loose, because the corporations are using them for bioweapons and drugs and stuff. And
yeah, I do feel like if they did another movie, they would have to do something very, very different than Aliens, just because that's what made Aliens so so impactful. And there's the video game from 2013 that's Aliens Colonial Marines that actually has some of the actors returning and things like that. But that's again kind of more of Aliens. I feel like having the company actually get their hands on a xenomorph and bringing it to Earth and just kind of letting it be set on Earth, I think that would be a smart way of doing it. And luckily, you have these characters in hibernation. You could you could just say, oh, they were in there for decades, and now Sigourney Weaver's like 60.
Right. I mean,
and just roll like that.
Totally doable.
Yeah.
Or you could have Sigourney be off on like some tour of the colonies running from Weyland-Yutani or something this whole time, or like there's so many ways you could do it and do something original, which I think was, like we talked about earlier, that's the real power of Aliens, is that it takes the original mythos and expands upon it with a whole new story in a new direction.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think you need to reinvent the wheel necessarily, but like we're saying, I don't think diluting it by giving more of the same is necessarily the right solution at this point.
Right. Or delving further into a backstory nobody ever really wanted to know to begin with.
Oh yeah.
It's
I so don't care about Prometheus.
it's like again, to go back to Star Wars, it's like when they made Solo and everybody's like, I don't really need to know that how he got his name or met like how he met Chewbacca. Who gives a shit? It's like it's basically a Wikipedia entry brought to life. It's just like, did you know that he got his name Solo because he was by himself? And we're like, they don't care. I don't know. You're wasting like $200 million to tell this story.
Yeah, and it kind of bit him in the ass from what I heard.
Kind of did. But yeah, so I mean, I think that would be cool. I think Sigourney Weaver she's been saying that she's been wanting to do that forever. And, you know, Ripley is obviously was like the kind of prototypical female action hero before Sarah Connor and all that, like on the big screen that made that.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. Made being a woman and being a badass in an action movie like that made it really mainstream and popular and, sort of made it okay for Hollywood to be like, you know what? Maybe if we give this, if we give a woman a gun, she could actually do some cool things and bring in audiences. I think obviously that was a stigma that's sort of broken down somewhat over the years. Not so much because people are still like, I don't know, a female superhero, a lady with a lightsaber. I don't know if I can deal with that. But Aliens, I think, kind of proved that. I think people forget that that's not that big a deal, and that we've been seeing that on the big screen for decades. So,
oh yeah, it just hasn't been as prominent in as many movies as it is nowadays.
Right, exactly. And I mean, in this case, it resulted in easily one of the best sequels ever made. I think that's kind of inarguable at this point. Let's see. Is there anything else we wanted to talk about in Aliens? I did want to talk about that this film. I feel like it's one of Cameron's first instances of doing what I like to call the 4-act structure, where you think the movie's over, you think they're getting away, and then not so fast. Which he does in True Lies, and I feel like it's somewhere else, at least another one of the Terminators or something. But that obviously leads into the big confrontation between Ripley and the alien queen. So what is it about that sequence that works so well? Because it's been so influential in cinema. I mean, you see in everything from like The Matrix or Avatar. Again, Cameron kind of ripping on himself. You got those like mech suits. What is it about that works so well? Because it's very thrilling every time you watch it. Totally.
Yeah, I mean, it's a way of extending the movie and giving it more momentum and not losing momentum. It seems like, because like in that whole escape scene when they're running down the ventilation shafts after the aliens bust in through the ductwork, and then they're trying to escape, and then all of a sudden Newt falls down through the spinning wheel thing, and they have to go rescue her, and then but she gets taken by the aliens, and it doesn't really dissipate like a lot of times when you extend the length of a movie, you risk, I think, diluting the action that's going on in it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
But with this sequence, like within Aliens at least, it just keeps ramping up until Ripley's confrontation with the Queen and her saving of Newt, and then they escape on the dropship. And then, but wait, there's more on the spaceship with the final showdown with the Queen Mother and the power loader scene. And like, it just, I mean, I don't know if he still has what he used to have in terms of creative ability, but once upon a time, Cameron really knew how to drive a movie like perfectly. At least in my mind. Like
And I mean, as part of my, when I was in college, I did my honors thesis on like morality and sci-fi and stuff. And so I did a whole deep dive into the first Alien as one part of it. And it's even like little things like in this movie, like the fact that Aliens is so focused on, the theme of motherhood and Ripley losing her daughter and then sort of adopting, Newt as sort of her surrogate daughter. That's what, like, thematically it fits that she's having a battle with the queen alien. You know what I mean? So it's almost like a struggle between two mothers, like fighting for their air quotes kids. And I think little things like that, like Cameron is so good as a writer and a director of honing in on those things and having everything feel of a piece as opposed to, just random action scene upon action scene. And yes, the tension and all that stuff is there, but I also feel like there's a certain subtext that he bakes into a lot of his movies as well that I think helps them to stand up not only as entertainment, but also as art in a weird way too.
Yeah, I mean, the whole mother arc, like you mentioned with Ripley, like she loses her daughter kind of to the aliens, kind of to the corporation. And then she gains Newt and is instantly protective of her and giving her hot cocoa and like chasing Gorman away from Newt, like when Gorman's trying to interrogate her and she's just locked up. And then Ripley like gives her the little tracking bracelet later on when she puts her to bed and like tells her about how she lost her daughter, but won't say that her daughter's dead. But Newt knows, and the audience knows that Newt knows. And then, like, to the very end of the movie, when Newt calls Ripley mom, like that, it's not a cheap mom when Newt calls Ripley mom. It's not like cheap. It's got a lot of weight to it. Like, that's really been earned by Ripley, like going above and beyond to save Newt and like go rescue her from the alien nest. Mm-hmm. When like any sensible person would have been like, whatever, what can we do? She's gone. We got to get out of here before this blows. But like Ripley like goes back to confront her demons, like the alien, the pure space dragon nightmare fuel, like in their own lair, like to rescue Newt. Like, I mean, again, like that's another element that just contributes to the whole gestalt of this movie. Like, without the whole Ripley Newt drama, like the movie wouldn't be what it is.
Yeah, he roots everything in character, I think, is the big difference.
Yeah, I mean, Sigourney didn't really want to do an Alien sequel originally because she was really worried about it doing exactly what we were discussing, diluting the original property. But then when she saw Cameron's script and she saw like the interactions between Newt and Ripley and like the whole motherhood arc, like she was all in, and Cameron had to have Sigourney Weaver for this movie. Like there were some budget negotiations and like the studio didn't really want to pay her $1 million salary and give her a cut of the gross, but like Cameron was like, I'm not going to do it without Weaver. Mm-hmm. Like he knew that she was critical to the story.
Yeah, it's that classic story. It's that classic kind of creative dilemma of, you know, what is your movie? What is your movie about? And it's like, well, it's about, you know, this group of Marines that go, and it's like, no. What is it about? Like, and the fact that Cameron is able to have his movie actually be about something, about motherhood or about, you know, whatever. I think it is a testament to it's what separates a movie like Aliens, which works on both levels, to something like Commando, which works on no levels, you know?
Oh, definitely.
Which
like,
works as a one-liner.
This is like an onion. This is like an onion. This is like layers upon layers of intricately crafted story all meshing together like gears perfectly. Well, as like you said, Commando is just a bunch of one-liners and like explosions.
Right.
And nonsense.
Is it this movie or one of the other Alien movies? Because I can't remember off the top of my head. I know that in one of them, Ripley has a whole speech like comparing the company to the xenomorph and how the company is all underhanded in their dealings and stuff. At least the Xenomorph like is like kind of honest about it. I forget if that's this one or one of the other ones.
Oh, that's Resurrection or 3, I think. I think that might be 3.
That must be 3.
Yeah, I think that's 3.
But yeah, see,
that's too good of a line for Resurrection, but I think that's in 3.
Yeah, I remembered it, so it can't be Resurrection. There's nothing in Resurrection.
Yeah, exactly.
Except there's like some weird scene where Ripley kind of hooks up with an alien or something. I don't even know what the hell was going on in there.
That was such a bizarre movie.
It's weird. Yeah, that must be from 3. So in this one, Cameron gets that message across without being so blatant about it, because he's a more nuanced filmmaker, and that sounds weird coming from the guy behind Terminator, but he's a more nuanced filmmaker than that. Like in his approach of what everybody likes to say elevated horror nowadays. Like, what does that mean? That's a horror movie that's good, basically.
Yeah. It's just a non-B movie horror movie,
right?
in my mind.
I guess, yeah. And then but Cameron really kind of specialized in the 80s and 90s in elevated action, basically.
Oh, yeah.
Kind of, yeah, making
it's
that
beyond action. It's not just an action movie like an Arnold could do. Like, you couldn't throw Arnold in this role.
No.
Have it be believable as Sigourney Weaver's character. Like, regardless of the whole Ripley or whatever thing, like, you couldn't put Stallone in this role. You couldn't put Jason Statham in this role. You couldn't put anybody but Sigourney Weaver in this role.
Right. Exactly. I mean, and it made her... it made her career. It made this franchise.
Oh, yeah.
This franchise that Ridley Scott is still making movies of for some reason, trying to do it without Ripley, and it's showing itself for what it is without her.
Yeah.
And
have you seen Covenant?
I have seen Covenant. I actually thought it was better than Prometheus. Like, I wasn't bored. At least.
No, there are actual aliens in this one, so I mean that's definitely an improvement.
Step in the right direction. Alien in the title, Alien in the movie. Fassbender's always fun to watch, even if the movie around him is just kind of whatever. Yeah. At one point, he's talking to him, a clone of himself, like the other one, and he's saying, "Oh, you have to like playing an instrument." He's saying about you have to finger it, and I remember that got Snickers in my audience. Here, I'll do the fingering, I think he says, and everybody's like. So we love.
It's
Cameron
not the same kind of humor, though. Really, like
no, it's not. Not even. Yeah. I don't even know if it was intentional, to be honest. I feel like it's like, yeah, like you said, I think Ridley Scott doesn't really understand the franchise that he started anymore. And
no, it's nothing like what he started, and he's trying to wrestle it back under control and take it in his original direction that he never got to take it in. It seems like. Yeah. Like, I really wonder if he'd done a second movie, if the Xenomorph would have even been in it.
No, I don't know. We'll never know, I guess. Unless, yeah. I think at this point, even
interesting, actually. Some real quick. Yeah. So Cameron had a lot of problems with filming the movie over in England because he was working with Ridley Scott's original crew at the original studio that Alien was filmed at, and they were very loyal to Ridley Scott, and they did not know who the hell James Cameron was, and they gave him all sorts of grief. Like, they would interrupt a complicated shoot and be like, "Oh, we gotta take tea time," or "We gotta go down to the pub," or like. And they weren't used to working a 12-hour shooting day like American film crews were. So Cameron ran into a lot of difficulties with Scott's basically leftover crew.
And he still managed to pull it together like this. That's very impressive.
Yeah, he still managed to pull this off. Like,
well, I think he knew this was his critical moment. Because like I said, he did Piranha 2, The Spawning, and then The Terminator, which was, a hit, but not like an Aliens level hit. I think it was a surprise that it did that well. So I think he knew this is my moment to either prove myself and be the next James Cameron, which he didn't even understand when he said that. So who knows what that meant. But to be the king of the world, I guess we could use a Titanic reference there. Or to slip away into obscurity as, hey, you're that guy that made that one good movie in the 80s. And, he stuck the landing and he nailed it because this was, like I said, this made actually around the same amount of money as Alien, like slightly more, and had the same critical response and, won Oscars and obviously, and people are still talking about it on podcasts to this day. Do you think, as we were talking about Cameron, I think we sort of alluded to the point that Cameron has similarly lost his vision of the Terminator franchise in the way that Scott has with Alien. So that being said, do you think there's any chance that the man who made Aliens, an amazing sequel to an already to a solid movie, to an amazing movie in that case, or Terminator 2 Judgment Day, delivers an Avatar 2 that anyone actually cares about.
Did anybody really care about Avatar to begin with?
We all saw
I mean,
it.
it made a buttload of money. Like, obviously, it made it was basically printing money at one point. Like, I mean, I saw it in the theater with 3D and stuff. I was pretty impressed. But like, and it was trying so hard to be Aliens. Like, I could see it every step of the way. Like the Marines thing, like the wannabe camaraderie thing, like the alien tribe camaraderie, and like it was trying really hard to get people to care about it, but I didn't really care.
Yeah.
Like, it was a very obvious Fern Gully ripoff to me, like to reference an old 80s animated movie.
Oh, I remember
that was
Fern Gully.
Very similar to Avatar in a lot of ways.
Yep.
Very similar in some very suspicious ways.
Robin Williams as a bat and Tim Curry as a cloud of smoke. Noxious fumes, yeah. That's all you need to know about that one.
Yeah, I loved that movie as a kid. That was great.
Tim Curry's great in general. I need to, I need to go back and watch some of that again. But yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, Avatar I didn't really care that much about, and like I watched the riff tracks of Avatar, but it's a long movie, and like Aliens is a long movie that doesn't feel like a chore to watch. And I think a lot of these movies that they're coming out with now that are longer should not have been so long. Like, yes, it's good to give some directors some more artistic freedom, but that doesn't mean you have to make every movie 3 hours.
Right.
And they feel like chores to watch. Like, and that's one thing that's why Aliens, like, not only does it have its special place in my heart for like how I was introduced to it and how like I scared myself so bad with it, but also like it's a movie that I can keep coming back to watch. Like, I watched it today and I was able to watch the movie, and like usually with movies that I've seen a bunch of times, when I watch it again, like when I watch it like to show my girlfriend or something, like I'll be kind of like half distracted on Facebook, kind of half watching the movie, like because I know it so well. Like, I've seen it so many times, like it doesn't hold a lot of surprises for me. Like Aliens, when you're watching it, like it doesn't matter whether it's the first time or the 50th time, like it's still a captivating movie that you're gonna watch and like be interested in what's going on with.
Yeah, there's a certain level of movie that, you know, whenever I'm on the computer and I want to put something on in the background, I'm like, ooh, no, I can't put that on. That's too good. I won't be able to focus on what I'm doing.
Yeah, you'll be watching the movie the whole time.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I mean, we'll see. I don't have a lot of faith in Avatar. What is it? 2, 3, 4, 5, whatever he's doing.
Oh yeah, there's supposed to be like 4 more, I think.
No, it's so funny because I was on his Wikipedia page a moment ago, and it has like his different franchise, Terminator franchise, blah blah blah, and then his Avatar franchise, 2009 to 2027. Because
yeah, I know he
he
wants to like make this his life, just making Avatar movies. I get he's fascinated by technology and by animation and by what it can do these days, but that doesn't mean you have to dedicate your life to it.
Right, exactly. Yeah, and I feel like my Avatar experience is similar to a lot of people's, in that I saw the first one, I was like, that was really cool, spectacle, whatever. I actually even bought the Blu-ray when it came out, and I watched it once, and that was 10 years ago, and I haven't watched it or had any interest in watching it since then. So
yeah, no, it doesn't have any captivation to it. Doesn't have any interest. Like, it's a chore of a movie to watch because it's so long, and like, even if it was shorter, I don't think I would really go back to watch it, just because it was all right. I mean, it was a spectacle. Like, look at what CGI can do. Ooh, exactly. Shiny.
Yeah, and yet they have a whole like part of the Disney park. I think it's Animal Kingdom in here in Florida.
Oh yeah.
I'm like, why? Do people care about that? Like, I don't know. We'll see what happens. Maybe Avatar 2 will come out and we'll all be eating our words. It'll be like, it's like Aliens and T2 all over again. But I feel like you were saying, filmmakers that reach a certain status, they just get way too indulgent with their storytelling. I mean, I'm thinking specifically of Quentin Tarantino, who I used to love, and then the last like 3 or 4 movies are all like 2 hours and 45 minutes, like 3 hours, and I'm like, dude, you could have chopped like a half hour out of this easy.
Oh yeah, like I saw Hateful Eight, but that's the last Tarantino movie that I've seen, just because, it's overly indulgent in a way. Like, sometimes a good artists need artistic freedom, but sometimes they need to be reined in on certain indulgences, you could say.
Right, exactly. So I think when Cameron made Titanic and it was 3 hours and 6 minutes or whatever, he's like, that's it. All epic movies from here on out. And he's made Avatar, and that's it so far. But yes. So is there anything, Will Nexii, about aliens that we haven't covered that you wanted to make sure we brought up?
Favorite line would have to be when Ripley says, I say we take off and nuke the site from orbit. It's the only way to be sure.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I love using that as a meme on Facebook, like a little animated GIF that I found. Like, it's just, there's so many perfect, and that's another thing about this movie is that there's a lot of great one-liners.
Yeah.
Like, game over, man, game over. What the F are we going to do? What the F are we going to do now? Like, and when Hudson's going apeshit, shooting the aliens in his final moments, and then gets pulled under and he's like swearing up a storm. And like, there's so many perfect quotable moments, and like Newt saying they mostly come at night, mostly.
Mm-hmm, mostly, yeah, I remember that.
And I mean, there's just so many things that this movie does absolutely perfectly. And it's just really amazing that Cameron hit it out of the park this early in his career as a director.
Yeah.
I think.
With a property that he didn't create, too.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And with a crew that hated him.
Yeah, apparently. Geez. Yeah, I mean, people are still, it's not like you were saying, it's not even just the get away from her, you bitch, which obviously everybody remembers, but much more than that. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, Hudson alone has so many quotable lines.
Oh, he's just a quote machine, basically.
No,
Hudson,
yeah,
every time and Bill Paxton leans into that like hard. I miss Bill Paxton. R.I.P. Bill Paxton.
Me too, man.
So sad.
This was my favorite of his roles, I think, and like he was improvising a lot of that stuff, I found out.
Yeah. Yeah, but
like,
I mean,
like game over, man part was all improvised, I think.
Yeah, he brings that, and that character in Lesser Hands could have come off really obnoxious.
Oh God, totally obnoxious. Like they do I mean, you've seen Hudson again in other action movies, but he's just obnoxious in those.
Yeah,
like that kind of role, not like Bill Paxton being obnoxious, but that kind of like smart aleck, know-it-all, like freak out role. Like. It's been done in action movies again and again and again, and it never comes close to Hudson.
Yeah, 100%.
Like, this movie's got a lot of archetypes in it that have been derived and diluted over the years in subsequent other movies and other takes on the idea.
Well, I mean, you said it yourself. At this point, Cameron is basically kind of in Avatar and beyond, kind of remixing himself, basically.
Oh, yeah. No, he's just... I don't think he has any creativity left.
Yeah.
He's solely focused on CGI, and he's lost sight of storytelling, I think.
Right. Yeah. Well, it happened to Lucas, so it's only...
Oh, yeah.
You know, I mean, that's how it goes.
Captivating, especially when you're used to having to do practical effects and, like, miniature effects. Like, so when they did this movie and they showed the Fox studio execs, the studio execs were like, you spent all this money on sets. Like, what were you thinking? Like, we gave that to you for special effects. And they're like, no. We did it all in miniatures and like sound stages. Like this was all perfectly in budget. Like they tricked the studio execs into thinking those are real actual props and sound stages. Like when most of those are miniatures. Like
yeah, wow.
And this game has a really on point miniatures game too. Like those are some really intricate models and stuff.
Mm-hmm. Well, I mean, not only that, we have. You actually see, well, it's not their home world, I don't think it is, but you see the LV-426, which now everybody every year has Alien Day, which you better believe I'm going to make sure that this episode is posted by then.
Nice.
Just because, might as well.
Hell yeah.
So definitely if you haven't seen Aliens in a while and you're listening to this, go check out Alien and Aliens, and then, watch Alien 3 if you feel like you have some time to kill. Or you're doing something on in the background just to look up, be like, poor Ripley. Pour one out for Ripley at the end.
The last 5 minutes.
Yeah, pretty much. So, Will Nexii, can you tell people where they can find you on social media?
So I'm on Facebook, Will _Nexii, I think, Nexii. And I also have facebook.com/group/372pages. It's an official fan Facebook group for Mike Nelson and Connell Estoka from Riff Tracks podcast, 372 pages, where they read bad books and make fun of them. kind of like a MST3K take on Bad Books.
Nice.
It's pretty fun.
Very cool.
Yeah.
So, Will Nexii, thank you so much for coming on to talk aliens and bringing it to the table.
This has been a blast, and I've had an awesome time.
Absolutely. We'll have to bring you back at some point to talk about something else. This was a lot of fun, and this is obviously a classic movie that I didn't get a chance to rewatch for this episode but I've seen it so many times that it's pretty fresh in my mind, except for that one quote, I guess, that I misattributed. But it definitely makes me want to go back and watch it again. So, people listening to this, I'll see you on the on Aliens, I guess, because we'll all be watching it now. But thank you, Will, for coming on. We'll definitely bring you back.
It was a pleasure, man. Have a great day.
Thanks, you too.
Take care.
If you're interested in joining me on the show to chat about one of your favorite films, head on over to crookedtable.com/guest. Or you can consider supporting the show at patreon.com/crookedtable. Of course, you can always find more podcasts, reviews, videos, and other movie-related goodies over at crookedtable.com. Until next time, this has been the Crooked Table Podcast, and I've been Rob.
This has been a production of crookedtable.com. All rights reserved.
The yard of the little KED.